I just got back from the movies, and oh boy, Evil Dead Burn is absolute cinema. Sebastian Vanic proved why Sam Raimi handpicked him to direct this movie, and he delivered the gory masterpiece he promised. But you know what I loved the most? The movie brought back our attention to the Kandarian Dagger. Yes, we love Ash with his signature chainsaw, and the multiple twists the chainsaw got in the recent movies, like Beth using one to dismember the Marauder in Evil Dead Rise. But the dagger? It's the ultimate answer to obliterate all kinds of Deadites, even the most powerful ones. Yet, it has been hiding in the shadows for a long time, letting the machines steal the show. But finally, Vanic brought it back and even gave us a subtle backstory as to why it ended up in Alice's in-laws' home. Sure, I'll tell you the details Byrne gave us, but in today's video, we'll dive deeper into the origins and history of this supernatural dagger. Because fans know that it didn't debut in this movie, it just made a glorious comeback. Let's get going. So in Evil Dead Burn, we got glimpses of the family history through Joseph, Alice's brother-in-law, who is guided through his grandfather's old research. And what was that research about? Of course, the Book of the Dead and Deadites. His mother never really liked his grandfather because he traveled a lot, lived in his own bubble, and worse, was a member of a cult known as the Circle of Wise Men. We see a scrapbook filled with parts of the Necronomicon and other ritualistic drawings, along with a voiceover saying that the wise men found out about the existence of a dangerous, uber-malicious demon. However, luckily, they also found the antidote, aka the Kandarian Dagger, which can demolish demonic forces. But it should be kept hidden because putting it out in the open can draw the Deadites. And that's exactly what happened. Joseph did what he wasn't supposed to do. He found the dagger and unleashed hell, and soon the Price family's summer home was filled with Deadites desperate to find that dagger and make humanity totally vulnerable before the Kandarian demon, with nothing left to fight back with. The dagger Vanic showed us is not bigger than a knife, with a rough wooden handle, and can be easily confused with other blades. Anyway, fans are wondering why the change of look of the dagger, and to know what it originally looked like, we have to look back to the very first Evil Dead movie of 1981. When Ash and Scotty ventured into the cellar, they found quite a few interesting things. A reel-to-reel tape recorder, an old book whose cover looked like a face, a shotgun, and a strange-looking dagger. Yep, that was the very first appearance of the Kandarian Dagger. It was a long silver blade with a gruesome handle made out of skull and bones and decayed flesh. When they started playing the tape, they heard the voice of an archaeologist, Professor Raymond Noby, who explained about ancient Sumerian burial rituals and a demon resurrection passage known as the Notorum Demento. Noby then explained how horrifying that book is. The incantations in it can summon demons which are dominant on Earth and can allow them to possess living bodies. Soon enough, Noby's story turns into a reality when Ash's friends get possessed by Deadites one by one. And then we see the charm of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead for the first time. Mind you, nobody knew the power of the dagger till now, and the Evil Dead primarily relied on dismemberment to kill Deadites. However, the magical powers of the dagger were hinted upon right from the original film. When a demonic Shelley tried to stab Scotty with a blade, Scotty managed to overpower her and sliced her head off. He then stabbed her in the back, and the dagger started smoking and got covered in blood as Shelley screamed before collapsing on the floor. However, Shelley managed to get back on her feet again, only for Ash to strike her with an axe several times. We didn't know anything about the dagger back then, but obviously it struck us that a normal dagger won't have a skull in the handle which starts smoking. And that's how Raimi established that this dagger was special. Then the dagger was used on Linda, but again she couldn't be killed with it and rose from her grave. And after the nightmare ended, they left the dagger in the cabin. But where did this dagger come from in the first place? Now, if you played the 2005 role-playing game Army of Darkness, you'd have a faint idea about the dagger's origin. Also known as the demonic dagger, or the champion's bane, the dagger existed in several alternate realities, and we have only one origin of it so far. In that particular timeline, it was stated that the Kandarian Dagger was created sometime in 3000 BC by a cult known as the Dark Ones and the followers of Uragan, a high priest. It was then known as the Blade of Ereshkigal, where Ereshkigal was the Sumerian goddess of death. The dagger was said to have been forged in the fires of hell, and they believed that the forces of evil were avatars of Ereshkigal. We don't have much information about what happened to the dagger between its creation and rediscovery from Castle Kandar, which was an ancient castle in ruins located in 14th century England. Fast forward to Evil Dead 2 from 1987, and we get more details about Nobi getting the dagger. The first recording told us how Professor Nobi found the book bound in flesh and written in human blood. But the recording in the second movie tells us a lot more. It gives us information on how Nobi found the artifacts. In the 1980s, the castle had become a site for archaeological excavation, and Professor Nobi went to explore the site with his wife Henrietta and daughter Annie, plus a colleague, Ed Getley. The group then discovered the Necronomicon Ex Mortis and the Kandarian Dagger in the castle's rear chambers, and Nobi brought the artifacts back to his cabin in the United States, where Ash ended up in the first movie. His research obviously backfired, and Henrietta got possessed and became the first victim of the Kandarian demon. She was buried in the cabin's cellar, but Raymond lost his life to the evil forces. In the second movie, Ash went back to the cabin with his girlfriend Linda. Once again, he found a tape recorder, the book, and an even weirder dagger. Yes, dagger number 2 in this movie looked significantly different from the last one. This one was a narrow metallic knife, and the blade looks rough and corroded. Along the surface, there was a row of small triangular bone-like spikes with a slightly curved handle. It also had a small skull-like head with eye sockets. Nobi's daughter Annie and Ed Getley arrived with some missing pages from the ancient Necronomicon to help her father. According to some extended lore material, Annie stayed behind to continue her work and found those pages. She was unaware what had happened to her parents, and right when the truth was revealed, Deadite Henrietta popped out of the ground. No matter how many times they locked her up, she found a way to come back and terrorized the people until Ash used his iconic chainsaw to chop her up. Groovy. However, Ash was possessed in this movie, and it was ultimately Linda's necklace which sparked his human side and helped him break free from the possession. But guess what? His possessed hand stabbed Annie while she was reciting a crucial incantation from the Necronomicon to give the Kandarian demon physical form and open a time rift. This left Ash to face the Kandarian demon alone, while Annie used her dying breath to complete the spell, successfully sending both the entity and Ash into a swirling time vortex that brings us to 1992's Army of Darkness. Now, one might think that after Ash got sucked into the time vortex, that would be the last we would see of the mysterious Kandarian Dagger. But thank God for the Ash vs. Evil Dead series, which picked up the loose threads in 2015 and finally gave the dagger an expanded role in the franchise. In fact, it's this show which made the Kandarian Dagger the most popular, in my opinion. So, how did the dagger connect to the show? We all remember Ruby, the main villain whose role as the Dark One got solidified in the Season 1 finale. In that episode, Ruby's intentions of unleashing the Deadites were revealed, and Ash's face was cut through with the Kandarian Dagger. I'll never forget how Ash joked about her weight to distract her and get the dagger from her hands. As soon as the blade came into contact with Ruby's skin, it started burning, but in the end, he had to make a deal with the demon to free his friend Pablo from the Necronomicon's possession. The episode, however, directly tied the Kandarian Dagger to the Dark One's mythology, and while Season 2 didn't really feature one defining dagger moment, it established across multiple episodes that the weapon was the only reliable way to permanently kill Ruby's demon spawn. Then came Season 3, which took the dagger's story to another level. In Episode 3, titled Apparently Dead, Pablo, Kelly, and Dalton returned to the original 1981 cabin to retrieve the Kandarian Dagger. Then in Episode 6, Tales from the Rift, we get the franchise's biggest dagger moment. Kelly confronted Ruby alone and blasted her with a shotgun. She even detonated a grenade, but none of it worked because Ruby, as a Dark One, could simply regenerate. Kelly then finally drew the dagger, which led to a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Ruby broke Kelly's leg and disarmed her, but in the struggle, Kelly was fatally stabbed with her own weapon, the Kandarian Dagger. However, Ruby used Kelly's death to transfer Kelly's soul into her body, meaning when Kelly walked away from the fight, she was no longer herself. But it wasn't until the season finale, titled The Mettle of Man, that the Kandarian Dagger really stood out. Ash sent everyone to safety after learning about the military plans to nuke Elk Grove. But they didn't know the side effect of the explosion would strengthen Kandar. Ash faced the demon all by himself and loaded the dagger into the barrel of an abandoned tank. When he found Kandar within range, he fired, and the blade caused Kandar to melt from inside out before collapsing onto the town below. It was the most cinematic use of the dagger and served as a full-circle moment, tying the weapon back to the demon's name and its origins at Castle Kandar. Now, if I go back to Army of Darkness, there's honestly nothing to talk about regarding the dagger. It just strengthened the lore of Castle Kandar and the Kandarian demon. Ash went back to the 1300s, and we learned that during these times, that is during the reign of Lord Arthur, the Kandarian demon roamed free in the dark forest just beyond Arthur's territory, and kept on terrorizing and transforming several locals into Deadites, and Ash happened to be the promised one, a hero from the future who would save them from the terrors of these evil spirits. Yeah, that's about it. Nothing about the dagger. Yes, in the series, it was shown that the Kandarian dagger could banish the demon, but frankly, we didn't see it demolishing a Deadite per se. Until the 2015 three-part comic Evil Dead 2 Beyond Dead by Dawn dropped. Written by Frank Hanna, in this comic, Annie found the dagger has the ability to kill demons with a single stab and absorb their souls into the dagger itself. Yes, the permanent destruction of the dagger was finally unveiled here. The comic continued Ash and Annie's story in a parallel dimension and continued directly from the ending of Evil Dead 2. So what happens to the Ash in the Middle Ages? Well, the comic book removed it entirely and started with Professor Raymond Knowby in the godforsaken cabin with his wife Henrietta. We get to see Henrietta getting possessed, as Knowby read from the Book of the Dead, and Deadite Henrietta attacked him, even trying to fool him, but thank God the professor had some sense. He shot her and dragged her into the basement. But what is a bullet for a Deadite? Henrietta mocked him as she was being buried, and he finally used the Kandarian dagger on her. He then returned to his study, waiting for the Kandarian demons to claim him. After this, the comic pretty much summed up the climax of the second movie, and we saw Annie ending up in the underworld where the demons attacked her. While she struggled to fight off the demons, Annie could hear her parents' screams from a distance. She began searching for them and witnessed something horrible. In fact, this is a comic panel that still gives me nightmares sometimes. People falling from the sky into hell. Annie realized that there was one major force that was holding her parents' souls and discovered something even more important. All the demons were terrified of the Kandarian dagger and that it had the power to completely destroy any Deadite and absorb their soul. The dagger here had a dark, organic look, with a handle shaped like a demonic skull and a twisted spine with rib-like projections. Annie gathered up the courage to torture one of them for information and found out that they all served Rabisu. Yes, this was the one who held back Mr. and Mrs. Knowby's souls. Annie then somehow managed to get back to the cabin, where she performed a ritual with Ash's severed hand, her own blood, and the Necronomicon. And she successfully created a clone of Ash and filled him in on everything. It took some convincing, but Ash agreed to go back to hell to fight Rabisu. While Ash was relying on his good old axe to chop up the Deadites, Annie finished them off with the dagger, and then also used the blade to pulverize a giant made entirely of corpses. Eventually, they found a locked room, which required the blood of a virgin to open, and neither of them qualified. So they split up, and while Annie went to track down an actual virgin, Ash headed off to rescue her parents. But there came a point when Ash got possessed briefly and Annie had to stab him with the dagger, which brought him back to normal. Now, I know it sounds like a contradiction of what the dagger can do, but I'm guessing it purified, or rather exorcised, this magical clone of Ash rather than killing him, because either he was freshly possessed or because he was created using ceremonial practices. But against fully formed Deadites, this comic established the dagger as the supreme weapon for banishing Deadites. And Ash used it as a container of souls, too. He found Annie's parents' souls and absorbed them into the blade, which gave it extra power, and he then killed Rubisu with it. He sliced the demon's stomach with the supernatural blade, and trapped souls came rushing out. It weakened Rubisu, who finally died. Once out of hell, Annie decided to free her parents' souls from the dagger, but it also freed all the Kandarian demons, meaning the evil was far from finished. I guess by now you have a rough idea of what the dagger can do, but I'll still give you an overview because it's been used in various capacities across the multiple tie-in media of the franchise. Apart from absorbing souls directly into its handle, the dagger can also absorb energy. In the same comic storyline I discussed above, Annie Nobi found out that stabbing demons with the dagger actually charges it up even more by soaking up their energy, which was indicated by the glowing blue eyes of the skull design on the dagger. In yet another game titled Evil Dead: Hail to the King, Ash discovered yet another function of the dagger. When he returned to the cabin after years, he found that the dagger had been used by Father Allard, aka Evil Ash, in disguise as a dark energy conductor, which allowed him to open up a rift in space and time. But now, let's come to Evil Dead Burn. The possible answer as to how the dagger ended up with Will and Joseph's grandfather is that he might have been an acquaintance of Professor Raymond Nobi, and the cult they talked about in the film might be something they were in together. Or maybe the family is somehow connected to Bruce Campbell's Ash. In a blink and you'll miss it moment, you'll find Bruce's photo hanging on the wall when Grandma was descending down the stairs. I could barely trust my eyes, but thanks to fans on the internet, my hunch was confirmed. We have no idea who Bruce was to this family and if it has any connection to the dagger, but he sure was someone important enough to have his picture hung on the wall. When the director was asked whether Bruce's Ash would be in this movie, he said, "Maybe. The fans will do the job. I just put things here and there for them to raise questions." And we fans did our job pretty well. It was indeed Bruce, and given the generation, it's possible he too might have been a friend of the grandfather, and that's how the dagger found a home in the Price family. Whatever it is, I'm so glad that the Kandarian Dagger found its place back on the big screen, and now there are so many possibilities of how its story goes forward in the franchise. Alright guys, that's it for today. The Kandarian Dagger has arguably been one of the most important artifacts in the world of Evil Dead, and I can't thank Vanic enough for bringing it out of the dark corners of history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked this video, give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!